Back in March, I published a Peep Show mini episode on my 31st birthday. In that episode, embarrassingly for me, I cried like a baby over how important I think it is that we are educating the future women of the world. It is, in my opinion, it is the biggest problem we are facing today. It is also the solution to a lot of other problems we're facing too, because when we educate our girls, we have a future to look forward to. So yes, I cried on a podcast episode while announcing that this year I've begun supporting the education of a young girl in Bangladesh through a nonprofit organization called Speak Up for the Poor, or Speak Up for short. After I recorded that episode, I got a little curious, and then I turned around and contacted them, the organization, directly to thank them for their work in the world. And that brings me to today's guest on the show, Troy Anderson. Troy is the founder and the international director of this very organization I'm just speaking of, Speak Up for the Poor, and he splits time between Bangladesh, Thailand, and the US. Prior to founding Speak Up, Troy graduated from UCLA School of Law and worked as a deputy district attorney with the Los Angeles County DA. Big time stuff. He's spent the past 8 years living and working in Thailand and in Bangladesh with Speak Up. Before law school, he graduated from the University of Puget Sound, which is in the Tacoma area, which is where I am from or have lived there for several years. He worked for 7 years with the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in Washington State. And Troy grew up in 4 countries outside of the US and has visited nearly 50 countries and is called uncle by thousands of girls in Bangladesh. He has a really unique perspective on what bravery means, and I know you're going to enjoy this episode. If you're interested in joining me to help further the work of Speak Up, then there are plenty of links and next steps you can take. All of those are in the show notes for today's episode on barenakedbravery.com. Later in the episode, I also pop in to talk about the next bravery classes that will open up for registration soon. So if you guys are interested in those, you can go to emilyannpeterson.com/classes. I am super excited for you to hear all that Troy Anderson has to say about bravery and how brave the people he gets to work with are and how much bravery education requires. But before I jump into the conversation, I want to apologize in advance for talking over him because I was so excited I could hardly think straight about some of these subjects. So please listen with a wee extra dose of grace and an open, generous heart, and I hope that you can get just as excited about all of this as I am, perhaps even more. You're listening to Barenaked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of Barenaked Bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet. Tag them in one of my Instagram posts. My handle is EmilyAnnPete. Or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world. So let's be brave together. Troy, thank you for joining us today.
Sure. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. So you guys, Troy is the founder of Speak Up for the Poor, or Speak Up, and I found them through, I actually don't even know, I can't even recall it, but I found them online some magical moment and immediately was hooked with how much they align, or you guys align, with my own mission to advocate for people who can't speak up for themselves. I mean, it's an obvious overlap.
The name got you.
It's an obvious overlap for me. So I want to hear a little bit more about how you got started in all of this and why this? Why are you doing this?
Yeah. Do you want me to explain what we're doing a little bit first, or you want to get into that later?
Yes.
Yeah. I can just do that briefly, and then I can answer that question about why we're doing it. So Speak Up works now in Bangladesh, hopefully in other countries soon, helping girls in poverty who are being exploited or in danger of being exploited in some way, helping advocate for them and empower and educate them. So we fund a home for girls whose mothers are in prostitution to help get them out of that and to be in school and have a safe life so they don't have to be forced into that lifestyle. And we have a big girls' education program, keeping girls in school in the villages of rural Bangladesh, and especially fighting against child marriage, which is the huge problem that they would face. And that leads to a lot of other exploitation. So I'm a lawyer. I set this up to do legal work for girls and women who are being exploited. Yeah, and so in brief, that's it. We do advocacy and empowerment for girls that are poor girls who are being exploited. And in Bangladesh, we're trying to take little poor girls and help them all the way through university so that they will be servant leaders to help in their village as doctors, teachers, nurses, whatever, empowered young women that will change the world for how the world looks at young girls.
I think one of the things that I was drawn to your organization through was how subversive and obvious it is at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, it's by educating the seeds of a community, you are empowering that community to become something better than it already is at this moment. So, and that's something that I already knew. And I'm always a huge advocate of education. I always have been. So I'm so glad that you guys came across my path. So you're a lawyer. Help me connect the dots. Help us connect the dots here.
I grew up in a bunch of different countries because my parents worked as international teachers and my dad as an administrator of international schools. So I lived in Dominican Republic, Yemen, Syria, and Norway when I was a kid. So think of the spectrum of those countries. That's like, from Dominican Republic to Yemen to Norway is about 3 most different places on earth. But so I grew up with that. So even when I went to college, I wanted to be a lawyer, but I had an eye on doing stuff globally and being engaged globally. I wanted to be a politician. I was dreamt, I want to be president one day, whatever. But I wanted to be involved in big global social issues because I had seen a lot of the world more than most of my friends when I went to college who hadn't been out of the country much. And so for me, that stuff was always in my blood. And then I worked for a while with a Christian ministry after university. Then I worked in inner city LA doing a tutoring program and some works in inner city. But I always wanted to do stuff internationally. And I spent some time visiting groups that were in India, Thailand, and Burma who were working to help get women out of brothels or young girls out of brothels. And basically because of that experience, things that I saw, it struck me so deeply that I knew, this is the kind of issue. This is like one of those ultimate issues that you could say, like the need for water or the need for peace in the Middle East or the need to fight AIDS or like massive global problems that certainly human trafficking or closely related to it, the broader issue of commercial sexual exploitation, that's one of those ultimate issues that you couldn't get down the rabbit trail anymore. That's a massive issue. So as a man, those things struck me so deeply that I'm not choking up because of the content, although I do sometimes. I just had lunch a little bit ago. Sorry. Those things struck me so deeply that I knew that was the kind of issue that I wanted to work on. And even as a man, I knew that this issue of girls being prostituted is not a woman's issue. It's a global issue that good people, men and women, need to work on. And for me, I knew that I wanted to do some of the advocacy part because it's not enough to run like a home for girls. You actually need to change the law or enforce the law or get girls out of these terrible places. And that requires the justice system, the police and lawyers to work together. So I went to law school to have skills so I could be involved in that part of the fight as a beginning.
I have a question though, because your first encounter with this was overseas. Is that what I understand?
With real extreme in your face kind of versions of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Was there like a moment during that trip that is like a cornerstone moment of?
Yeah, totally. The first time I went to Thailand, and I always tell people don't have just a stereotypical view of Thailand, because Thailand's a beautiful country and other places have just the same problems. And it's not just sex tourists that are a problem. It's Thai men that drive 95% of Thai prostitution. All of that said, Thailand has a huge problem with the sex industry.
Yeah.
As many other countries do. And the first time I went to Thailand, I went with groups. We were trying to learn about these issues and how trafficking or sexual exploitation and this stuff tied together. And I went into a place with a team of men. I always tell men, you can't be involved in any of this stuff alone. It's not wise. But went with some men into one of these places. It wasn't like a brothel, but a place like a bar where men could just go and the women were right there to buy. And
now, when you walked in as the group of guys,
we went to a place that foreign men go.
Yeah.
And so some local ministry or some NGO nonprofit was going to show us what it was like, because we were like, we have no idea.
Yeah.
Like 20 years ago. So I was just learning for the first time. So we went in this place and we were just pretending kind of like, oh, we're just here as like customers to kind of see what the deal is. And I remember they drew back the curtains of this, and there was all these beautiful Thai women. These ones I don't think were minors. Maybe some were 17. And they had these beautiful red dresses on with numbers. And the guys would sit there like 15 feet away where they opened the curtain, and you'd have your drink and you just say, oh, I like number 13. And you could go upstairs with her. And this is the kind of thing where you might have seen in movies or people joke about it. Oh, but it's so shocking when you really are attuned to really thinking of this issue. Even if she's not a minor, 20-year-old woman sitting there, and I'm going to pay $10 to go have sex with her upstairs after a few drinks. And she's just sitting in this room waiting for that and trying to look beautiful. And it was so disturbing. So before I left on that trip, I had heard a person give a sermon and a talk with a group of us going overseas. And he said, when you go places, you're not going to be able to fix things. And sometimes your heart will just break. And actually, you can't fix things quickly. There's no quick solution to these big global poverty issues. But the things that make you cry are something that you should do something about, whether as a Christian, you believe God put it on your heart, or just a good person, like that's something that you should care about. So basically he said, be attuned to the things that make you cry. And I thought, I don't cry very often, but that's a good concept, because I don't like cry. At least then I didn't cry that often. Now I do more. But after that evening, seeing that, I felt so horrible, not horrible about myself, but just, it was so horrible that I went back to the hotel and I just couldn't stop weeping for a long time. And then I remembered like, oh, that guy said, and I thought, that's weird. And that was part of the process of me thinking, actually, there's something for me as a man that strikes really deeply, because once I put it together, I realized if you take a seed of, I'm just going to abuse this woman for my own pleasure, if you take that seed and just take it to its worst conclusion, it's, why don't we just lock them up in a room and we can take them whenever we want? I'm talking bluntly, this is the reality of the world, right?
Right.
That is so disturbing. I thought, like, men need to be in this fight, because the seed of maybe we want to be selfish or exploit women, taken to its worst logical conclusion, ends up in this horrible thing, which later I saw stuff even worse with 10, 11, 12-year-old girls that you could buy that just is so horrifying. But that stuff struck me so deeply, I went to law school so I could be a lawyer to fight that stuff.
Now, in the hotel room, you're weeping, and what's going through your mind as you're reacting in this way?
Well,
Do you
I had
remember?
a team of friends with me, so they were kind of like, dude, and I was kind of leading this team of college students, and they're like, dude, our leader's all wigged out, and they understood. Like, it struck me deeply, and it probably impressed them. Like, Troy's really being moved by this, but other than the part of you that can't think when you're feeling something so deeply, the other part of me, and that over the course of that summer, predominantly in Thailand, I had trouble sleeping, not because I was frustrated, because I had so many ideas. It was just coming alive to me, like, oh, I've grown up in all these countries. I've seen all this stuff around the world. This is the thing I'm going to do. Something with this kind of sexual exploitation, or the way men mistreat women.
I've seen that happen a lot so many other like artists, business owners, other advocates. Like a lot of times, this is the case with myself too. A lot of times our histories inform our calling.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And I had, it and different parts of that, right? There can be 8 or 10 pieces that come together. So I like living in Yemen when I was a kid. Yemen is the poorest of all of the Arab countries in the world, where now I know it has like horrific problem of child marriage with like young 9 and 10-year-old girls being married in the tribal areas, just horrific problems. But as a kid, seeing that kind of poverty, that I knew in my gut, someday I'm going to come back and do something to help. When I was a kid, I wanted to help the dogs, like, oh, the poor dogs are mistreated. And as an adult, I'm like, well, people need to help the dogs. That's awesome. You probably have people on your show that do animal rights, awesome stuff. But I realized for me, I need to do something for people. And so, yeah, when all those things are coursing through my heart and my mind during that summer, when I first saw these things, thinking I was made to do this, because you need men and women to work on these issues. You need young and old, you need different colors, you need everyone of all religions. There's a place for everyone to work on that specific issue, which I've learned now a much broader picture of what it looks like. It's not just human trafficking. It's actually the way we treat girls in poverty is the big issue that we need to deal with, and the exploitation that comes when we treat them poorly. But yeah, that started this, what now is 15 or 20 years process of me doing stuff about that, because it struck me so deeply.
So you came back from Thailand and immediately went to law school.
Yeah, I went to law school that fall.
No, really, like you came back from Thailand.
Yeah,
and
I started law school. Yeah, I mean, I had
amazing.
to the year before I had applied and got into law school, because I was going to do something with justice. And that summer I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to do something to do this and be a defender of working on those kind of issues. So yeah, I started law school. That was fall of 2002. So I guess it was 15 years ago. And yeah, so then during law school, I incorporated Speak Up as an organization that I could use one day to do the work I wanted to do.
And did you do it right away, or did you?
No, I worked with the DA, the district attorney in Los Angeles County, for 2 years, year and a half, to almost shy of 2 years. But because I needed a job to kind of pay off my loans a little and kind of figure out exactly how am I going to do this thing that I've been talking about. I set it up thinking I might work for another organization, or if no one wants to hire me, or if I don't find the right fit, I'll work for myself or start my own thing. So I looked at different groups, and it's great. There's some great organizations that people can work for, even as a lawyer. But I realized the specific thing I want to do, or even inside of me, which I couldn't quite articulate, but I knew someday I'm going to find a kind of program that I want to do exactly what I want to do. And the only way I can do it is if I'm the boss, in a humble way, but in the right way, to say, this is what needs to happen. The only person in the world is going to pay me to do it is if I get a board that pays me to run the organization the way I think it should. So,
Right.
So I worked a couple of years, and then around 2008, I really started.
With your work with the DA in LA, how did that work inform the way you created and work with Speak Up today?
It didn't have a huge impact, although it was an interesting time. As a DA, you start prosecuting cases in misdemeanor court. So misdemeanors, anything that the punishment can be up to a year in jail. So it's minor crimes. And actually a lot of people, as I got to know them, they said, oh, you should have been a public defender because you like the poor and you're working for justice, and you should have been on that side defending people accused of crimes. But what I told them, and what I really learned, was actually, as the DA, you have tremendous power, which some people use for bad, but you have tremendous power to do justice. So if there's people that do need to be punished, like men who are beating their wives or their girlfriend, whatever, and that was a case, I didn't feel like a lot of sympathy for them. I mean, they need to not just be crushed, but they need to be appropriately punished. But then there were some cases where, certain kind of cases where, like, let's say, people back from the Iraq war who had PTSD, and that led them to do stupid things. I thought, well, if we just crush this guy and give him the maximum punishment I can get out of the court, it's not going to help him. It's going to make him worse off. And instead, we can use the coercive power of the state to say, you've done this stupid thing, but if you meet these standards and don't do anything else foolish, we can dismiss your case or give you a light punishment if we agree on that with the court. So actually, there's tremendous power if you handle it right as a DA to do justice. So I liked that position.
I think that's such a really cool insight, because in our conversations about bravery, we're always talking about constraints and limitations. and how you can imagine or have a vision of possibility in spite of those constraints and limitations.
Yeah.
And one of the gifts that lawyers bring to our world is that they have an intimate understanding of the constraints and limitations of our society. Yeah. And they are able to use those constraints, not just wallow in like going, well, I can't, I'm not allowed, but they're able to say, no, I have an objective. I have a thing I want to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that thing in spite of, or in the midst of all of these rules and regulations.
Yeah. And like anything with that tremendous power, there is obviously potential opportunity for abuse. Like people, you hear this, especially in states that, I won't mention the states, but where a lot of people are prosecuted where they know that they're not guilty, or they'll hide the DNA evidence, like terrible things that some district attorney's offices do. But other ones, I was like many layers away from the DA himself but that you have tremendous power, because you could go in and say one word, Your Honor, the people dismiss this case. Boom, the case is done. I just couldn't do that in any case because I would get in trouble. But you could actually say to someone or through their lawyer, if these things are met, we would be happy to dismiss this case at this date. And so something appropriately is some pressure is hung over them, but there's actually opportunity for freedom, which for minor cases, for major felonies, you can't like barter on murder cases that much, but for smaller things, which you can actually do that. So the system should work that way, that there needs to be appropriate punishment, whatever that is, that can be a discussion, but in some cases use the power of the state to do the right thing, which isn't that like, that's an idealistic statement, but that's how it should be. So I liked that job. And so it probably gave me some professional skills or some insights into that process that I could think, when we go enforce the law in Bangladesh against child marriage, you try to use the coercion and persuasion and power and opportunities to influence what it should be, because it's not just about the dry letter of the law.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that dry letter of the law, at least in the US, is determined by people and history, and you can change it to some degree. You can. And
everything is about interpretation. You find when you're in law school that the word reasonable is everywhere in the law. But what does that mean? Because what's reasonable to you is not reasonable to me, or what a reasonable person is totally open for interpretation. So trying to do ultimately what's reasonable is what the purpose of the law should be, rather than just saying you did this, which it's even hard to prove what the fact actually was. But even if we can agree on the facts, then agreeing on what should happen to someone based on that can be tricky. So the law, a lot of it is dry and boring, and half of law school, you're like, oh my God, this sucks. But the other part, it's like fascinating because it is an application of how corporately we've decided society should work together.
We'll talk about this a little bit more too. We'll just talk about it right now. So you've mentioned your faith a couple of times already, but I know that Speak Up and Speak Up for the Poor is not a faith-based organization in and of itself. And so my question is this: how does the comparison of culture between America Christianity or America atheist and the Bangladesh and all the other religions that are involved in your organization, how do all of those things blend together and compare with each other? How do you make that happen? That's a really big question. It's a loaded question.
So basically,
sorry.
How to handle religious issues. We're not a religious organization, although depending on what term I want to use, I try to be like Jesus. I try to follow Jesus. I'm a Christian, maybe not
because that's your personal faith.
Personally, what I'm trying to understand and believe, and I try to live out of that. But in Bangladesh, it's 90% Muslim, 9 or 10% Hindu, and a scattering of other faiths. My staff there is Muslim, Hindu, and Christian. The girls we work with are about 50-50 Muslim and Hindu. And so we tell the families very overtly, we're not a religious organization. Look at my team. We're a mix, and we're not converting your daughters. So we're overtly that. And you can imagine in the US, there are some people, some conservative Christians that don't like what I'm doing because they think the only thing you should be doing is converting people. I'm like, well, you can go do that if you want. And there actually are some people on the far other extreme who think, what is a white American male lawyer, Protestant, heterosexual Christian doing? Because I am the man for many people. What are you doing in another culture? So both extremes might not like my approach. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And I've got flack from both extremes, but I say, for me personally, if I have my understanding of God is that I have been given grace, and so I should extend grace and love. And two, how can you be a person of any conscience if you see this kind of thing? This 10-year-old girl who I know in 3 years is going to be married. It's essentially spousal rape, and she's destined to a life of misery. And worse, the ones who end up in brothels. How can you not, whether you're an atheist or a Christian, how can you not care about it? But if you say you're trying to believe in Jesus, how can you not give your life to help these people?
Yeah,
So
and your situation is a perfect example of, I think a lot of us, when we face our callings or when we are facing a brave moment, we have a unique gifting, whether we like those gifts or not. Whether you wanted to be a white male Protestant born in, American.
The Christian part, but the rest.
Right. Right. Exactly. Even just the white male aspect, you were born with a gift, and whether we all love it or not, now you get to choose to use that or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's the case with a lot of us when we're facing our brave moments, is that we are equipped with our own unique skill sets. Yeah. And it is really our responsibility and a responsibility, not just an obligation, but a responsibility to use those things.
Yeah, totally. And there is not just that you are the only person that can do what you can do. Right. So I can say, both beyond my specific skill set, me as an individual, there is a thing that only men can do. Mm-hmm. And it's great because there are things that way I can talk to girls or women that they need to hear from a man. That's really powerful. It's awesome.
I imagine too in Bangladesh that there are things that if I were to go in and ask a group of people to do, they might not respond to me in the same way that they would respond to you. So,
and if you were working with me, I would challenge people you got to listen to her. Don't not listen to her just because she's a woman. So that needs to be challenged. But beyond the patriarchal stuff, just the fact that little girls or women need men and women in their lives. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's good. So this girl's home, the Allingon home that I'm the uncle to these 21 girls, I'm the only man that really speaks into their life, and they need to have an uncle that's oh, he's a good man. He won't abuse me. He disciplines me when he needs to. He loves me. Oh, that's what men should be like. And so they need to hear that. Just there's certain things, obviously, that women only can do. There's some jobs that anyone can do with the right skills. But yeah, I feel that on every issue, even racial issues in America, there's a certain role that white men need to play. It's not just giving away their power, although a big part of it is that, laying down their power, letting other people lead. But there's certain things that I can do, including talking to other white men, that I can say, dudes, let's get our act together. So yeah, I feel like everyone has both individually or as whatever demographic they are, has a unique thing to bring. And yeah, we need to be bold with that.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by my lovely Bravery students. I know we've got a lot of new listeners lately. Welcome! So if you're new to the show, allow me to introduce you to the concept of what a Bravery student is. Authors, musicians, visual artists, shop owners, journal writers, fellow podcasters, and even prodigal creatives. All of you face some pretty daunting things, which is why it is truly an honor to witness my students unfold and reveal extremely impressive and really badass bravery within their work and their life. And that's exactly what happens in a bravery lesson too. My students and I spend time looking at the vulnerability, imagination, and improvisation their situation is requiring of them. Then we clear a path for all of that, and we make a plan for moving forward. It's really tangible, and really, honestly, by the end of every lesson, there's this big breath of relief for what we uncover and how we can move forward. You can find more info for all of that at emilyannpeterson.com. /classes. Regardless of whether I'm working with one-on-one students or a class of bravery students who are focusing on one big subject like life transitions, finding your voice, unleashing your creativity, or even simply self-promotion skills, all of my students walk away from each lesson with a tangible 1 to 3 things they can accomplish to practice and become the brave, badass creatives they want to become. I've got a couple classes coming up in the near future, so be sure to get on the waiting list for the ones that strike your fancy, and maybe even the ones that terrify you just a little bit. Go to emilyannpeterson.com /classes. There you will see a buffet of opportunities to take the next steps. So again, go to emilyannpeterson.com /classes for more information. Now let's get back to today's conversation.
Okay, so I would love to hear some stories about these girls, if you're ready or willing.
Yeah, I can tell you some specific stories. So I'll give you a general story about our girls that this happens, and I'll tell you examples of it.
Sure.
So when I first went to Bangladesh or started our girls education program, I would go to a few villages where we're now working, and I would say a basic phrase to them when I'm learning Bangla. Tomar ki shopno, or Tomar shopno ki means what is your dream? Right? So basically asking them, that's the way you'd say it in Bangla. What is your dream? Are you going to be a doctor, teacher, lawyer, nurse? What is your goal? And in most wealthy countries, certainly in America, most people from a young age, it's part of our culture, just, I'm going to be an astronaut. I'm going to be a fireman, teacher, whatever, right? Like me, I'm going to be president. But these girls looked at me really confused and they didn't understand. So I would repeat it and I'd ask my partners, the Bangladeshi partners, say it in Bangla. They don't understand what I'm saying. And my friend said to me, they understand the words. They don't understand the idea because no one has ever asked them, what is your dream? Because for these very poor girls, there's no such thing. In the poor Bangladesh, 67%, maybe nearly 70% of the girls will get married before they're 18. In the village is 80, 90%. So it's like, well, what does that even mean? A dream? I'm going to get married when I'm little. So these girls don't know how to answer the question. Then I'm like, okay, this we're going to change. We're going to build something that's going to have thousands of girls saying, Uncle, I'm going to be a doctor one day. And so, of course, they always change, right? Because a 12-year-old's going to change 10 times by the time she's 20. But just the power of having a dream. I'm going to be a teacher. I can do something more than just be reduced to making babies, right? So that is really powerful. So if you look on our website or in our Facebook page and stuff, you see a lot of pictures of girls holding a little card that says to be a doctor, to be a nurse, basically answering, why are you staying in school or what is your dream? So that is awesome because I love to see the young girls light up like that. And when they're 13 or 14, they're like, oh, I really can be a nurse one day. And I say, yeah, okay, but a dream's not enough. Now you need to have a plan to help you get to nursing school. But yeah, so we would do that. So
just so you know, like my eyes were all misty up. Just trying to imagine what it would be like to not even know what it is to dream of something like that. And it speaks to how privileged I am because that concept is so foreign to me. I can't even fathom it.
And
so thank you for doing that for them.
Like we need to do it 1 million times over, literally like 1 million times over. Because we have about 1,250 girls in our program now that have a dream and more that we're trying to reach. But and even more than them having physical stuff at that moment, which they need, especially for school, they need books and uniforms and teachers and stuff. Having the opportunity and possibility, which is the best part of our country in the US, is like, we have our issues, obviously, like major issues, but having that in our core identity, like a land of opportunity where you can reach something. Whether that's true or not for everyone, but most of us can do that. Having that for these young girls is awesome power. That's going to change their life. They'll be able to negotiate through poverty with partnership with us to reach something better. So now all the girls know, they're all going to be doctors. And I go, well, most of them won't be because it's impossible for every girl to get into medical school. The numbers don't allow it, even if they're all brilliant. But they can do something awesome. So now they all know, and now we're working, okay, what's your plan? Because you got to have steps to be able to be a nurse. So that's a general thing. So we're just teaching all these girls to dream, and it's awesome. I could do that 100 times a day, give talks to the girls, like, have a dream. You can do anything. You are loved. We're with you. No one can stop you. If anything bad happens, we're with you. Reach your dream. You can do it. And they're all fired up. And I'm like the cheerleader for thousands of these Bangladeshi girls. Like, how crazy is that?
It's so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, so my thesis with bravery, I know that you guys have already heard this a bajillion times if you've listened to a lot of the episodes, but my thesis is that bravery is the overlap between vulnerability, imagination, and improvisation. And the imagination piece requires a really in-depth and like highly in tune vision of possibility. And we've already talked about that a little bit, but basically just the skill of being able to see what could happen can be practiced. And how do you see that skill being practiced amongst the girls that you've got over in Bangladesh?
Yeah. Well, I would say, like, for me, my understanding of that is like having vision, and then the courage is like saying, dang, doing that, I want that, but doing it is really difficult or bravery or dangerous. But
right. Well, and the plan element that you're talking about, like, yeah, it's great to have a dream, but you also have to have a plan. That's where like that improvisation piece comes into play, because you're looking at where are all your constraints, where are all your limitations, and then using your power of choice to act on that dream and go for it.
So I can tell you like specific stories, like of girls who have a vision and they're courageous in it. So one of my little friends, Oshtame, this is her real name. So she's now in 10th or 11th grade. So when she's about in 6th, 7th grade, in her village, a bunch of girls we knew, 13 and 14-year-olds, were getting married. Girls that were starting to be part of our program, little, tiny, beautiful little girls, like incredible. These ones are getting married. So disturbing. So we finally got the police in that area and some of the political leaders from that area to come together and have a big village meeting where the police were all there with their guns. So all the men are coming like, whoa, something's going down. The whole village is there. And me and my team and the police and the local leaders all said, child marriage is illegal. It's wrong. And you can't do it here anymore. You're going to get in trouble. Very clear to every man in the village. But Oshtame, like only about a week after that, her dad came to her with the man she's supposed to marry, because one meeting's not going to change 500 years of history and culture and poverty, right? I mean, we haven't even talked about the reasons why people do child marriage. But so he comes to her with a man she's going to marry and says, oh, this weekend you're going to get married, which is what they do 3 or 4 days later. And she says to her dad, no, you can't make me get married. I'm going to be a teacher. And think, this little tiny girl, maybe she was 12 or 13, and she must have been 13 at that point. No one talks back to their dad, tiny little girl. And he says, no, you didn't understand. You're getting married. And she said, no, the police said you can't make me get married. And if you do, you'll get in trouble. And I wasn't there, but they told me the story that the whole village starts coming around because Oshtame, little tiny Oshtame, is yelling with her dad in this big animated discussion saying, you can't force me. They call me Troy Uncle. He said you can't do it. The police said you can't do it. My partner, Uttam, he said you can't do it. Everyone's on my side. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to stay in school. And she basically like shouted down her dad and stayed in school. So imagine this little girl, like thin, small, like barely 5 feet tall, 13 years old, going against that level of culture and power tradition, where every other girl, probably her mom, the same thing. Someday when she's 13, 14, 15, the father says, oh, you're getting married this weekend. Get ready. And no matter what they feel, they cry, whatever they think. Okay. And that's what happens. So that like is courageous. So she's like, Malala in Pakistan and the Taliban, that whole thing, like obviously great courage that she's had to speak up. But this is a girl with very little education, not some global, she's speaking English, like very simple, poor village girl who had a few people that empowered her, that gave her some courage, that she's able to say, no one's going to force me into this. And so she stayed in school. So we have a lot of girls like that if you were to go over there or your friends like come and visit and you're just like, look at this amazing little girl with nothing. I mean, Oshtame, she might have had probably doesn't have electricity in her house. Very simple. That's courage. She saw something she wanted and she's like, well, to get there, I have to shout down my dad and the entire culture is going to hate me. And these fundamentalist Hindu priests, she's Hindu, are going to hate me. And but she's like, screw that. I'm going to be a teacher.
I'm going to do it anyways.
Yeah, that takes some guts, right?
Yeah, it does.
So, and the cool thing is that people, not that everyone's naturally super bold, but I think there's some element of courage in everyone, or at least the opportunity to do that if you have a bright enough vision of something that you see, which is why we have to do that, paint a picture of what it means, what that dream could be, paint what it could be like. They know what it's like from their mom to be married when you're 14 or 15. And they say they're hungry enough for this. They're willing to, and they want to fight against the system or do something courageous.
So when you get a girl into your organization who maybe doesn't have a good sense of what her dream is, how do you open up those doors for her? I mean, other than just saying you can be whatever you want to be. Like,
yeah. I mean, certainly in any group, there's some that are just saying something and they're still not sure. And,
right.
you know, we know a bunch of them, unfortunately, will drop out of school after 10th grade, and many of them after 12th grade. But even if they just finish 12th grade, they will be tremendously ahead than if they just finished 8th grade and got married. But yeah, there are some of them that I know aren't great students, aren't real super motivated. And that's just reality, because no matter where, it's not like every girl in Bangladesh is some incredible rock star. They're all like, just like anywhere, people are people. So you don't need to force it on people. I mean, to be in our program, they have to stay in school, and they can't be in our program without at least be preparing for something. Even if we sense like that girl probably is going to drop out after 12th grade, she won't go to college, but you know, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you just work with the individuals, and then the ones who are more really going for it, you feed that, because you know they're going to be the ones that are going to be the example to the other ones.
Yeah, I think, you know, you guys are a great example of how, or that's a great example of how you don't have to know what your calling is. You just have to do the next right step.
Yeah, totally.
And in the case of your girls, it's the next right step is to stay in school.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have to decide whether you're going to be a doctor, teacher, police officer, whatever. You just have to keep going. Go to school tomorrow. Go to school the next day, and then go to school the next day.
Yeah, keep faithful with it, which is probably like most of life is like that, right?
Right.
And, you know, the way the education system works in there and in many places, you have earlier than in the US, you have to decide and get on the track for science or liberal arts or whatever. So they do have to make some significant, like concrete decisions. But yeah, I mean, the real thing is like anywhere, the issue is mostly your character, your mental choices, and kind of the person you are is going to help put you on the right path. Yeah. So we have girls that will change, obviously, especially the little ones change all the time. But yeah, it all is what happens inside, right? Or in your heart, or however you want to talk about it.
Right. Okay, so I don't want to take up all of your time, although I kind of do, because I have so many more questions.
Yeah, I'm good to go for.
Well, I would love to. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what some of your fellow colleagues are like, and how they got into, or how you acquired them in your team. Yeah,
so our team in Bangladesh is all Bangladeshis and me. In America, we have my board, great friends, personal acquaintances that I've recruited to be my board, and then volunteers. So in the US, it's like just people that want to love the poor through working with me, becoming increasingly sold on the idea like this is the way, this is the global poverty justice issue to deal with girls in poverty, and they want to work with me. My friend Maggie, who lived in Bangladesh for a year, working with a girls' home and our GEP, and now she's back in the U.S. and does some of our stuff. You probably got an email from her yourself, sending you pictures of the girl to sponsor and everything. So on the U.S. side, just good people who just want to, give to helping those things. In Bangladesh, we don't have foreign staff, except I'm there because I kind of went there to help start something. But we have American volunteers, students, people come for a short time, and over time, maybe we'll have some positions that foreigners can do. But Bangladeshis that are there, and I found my partner, Uttam. I knew I wanted to build some kind of organization, which I didn't know exactly what, but 5-6 years ago, I found him and talked with him, and we started a pilot program with 20 girls like 5.5 years ago. And I wanted to kind of see what he was like. And, in that we had to hire a few people, and over time it just grows, right? So
So 5.5 years ago.
Yeah.
So 5.5 years ago, you started with 20 girls, and now you have how many?
We have 1,250 officially in our program. Yeah. So December 2011, we brought those 20 girls together to start January of 2012. So 2017 is our 6th year. So yeah, so we have girls officially. Then it was a little bit haphazard, like, well, we'll pick these 20 in these 3 villages and we'll kind of do something and see how it goes. And then over time, I realized this is awesome. And then my board agreed, yeah, let's set it up as a sponsorship program to pay for these girls. And then we went from 20 to 50. Then we got sponsors for them. And then I'm like, well, there's 100 more that want to join. So we went to 150, and gradually just balancing the need and stretching money as far as we could, balancing that with like being rational, like this is all the money we have or what we can reasonably raise, we think, and gradually just building it. So every year now we have 300 and 600, and like, well, there's 200 more that want to join next year. If I get 100 new sponsors, so we'll join them. And so, yeah, we have 1,250 now from 5th grade through university. And we have 53 girls in either nursing school or university of some type, and 20 younger girls living in the city in our dormitory, high school girls who are either the brightest of our high school students or the girls in the worst situation that we kind of took them from their dad saying, you can't get her married off or you'll go to jail, but we'll take her to our dorm. And so our dorm's awesome. It's like the extremes, but they're all equally awesome. But yeah, so we have this huge mob of girls, and thousands more would join if we had the team and the resources to do it.
And I sponsor a girl from Raina. Is that how you pronounce
Ranai,
it?
I think.
Ranai,
Yeah.
in India. Jyoti, Joti is how you spell her first name.
Yeah, it's probably Jyoti. Yeah, I'm going to look and see. Yeah, so she's in Ranai village there in Bangladesh. Jyoti. Is that her?
It is. That's her.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
He just showed me a picture of her.
Yeah.
So you guys, you can sponsor one of these girls for $30 a month. I chose 31 just because it's my 31st birthday, and I made the choice to do it for my 31st year. So I picked 31 to be cute. And then I just think that, $30 is a really easy number. It's just a really easy number. And if you guys are at all intrigued by any of this story, I encourage you to sponsor one of these girls, because it will really literally change their lives in as many ways as you could possibly fathom. It will change their lives for the better. So, okay, before we depart, Troy, how, other than sponsoring one of your girls, how would you encourage someone who's listening who maybe has a really big, huge idea or dream, and they don't know, or they want to tackle one of these big, huge global problems, and what should they do next? How should they move forward?
Well, you should do it for certain as a starting point. So don't just have it be an idea, because if you just have an idea and you don't do it, you're either going to become cynical and hate yourself because you gave up on something that was beautiful, or you're going to feel like, oh, I suck, I'm fearful all my life. So it's good and bad, but if you got this awesome thing, you have to do it. So do it. That'd be like my best advice. But I mean, you need to talk to a lot of different people, learn from other organizations. Don't worry about doing what any one person did, because what I did to start an organization might be the perfect thing for some people, and other people, because of their skills or gifts or role or timing to start something, isn't for them, and they should join another thing. Everyone should be cooperative with others, but don't try to be like someone else. I think you should get feedback from other people, and especially the younger you are, ask someone and say, so I want to do this. This is an issue in my heart. What do you think I should do? And really honestly take critical feedback, because some people, wise people, might be able to say, have you thought of this? Have you talked to this group? Have you realized this about yourself that might need to change? Have you thought of financial implications? So I'd say get a lot of feedback and be humble to learn from people, so you know what you're getting into. But then I mean, there's probably 1,000 things I could say depending on person's circumstance, but also know that it's not going to be like, woohoo, like I'm just going off to save the world and it's awesome, because there'll be moments of that, right? And now, like, right, this 1 hour, it's fun. I get to talk about what I'm doing, and you think it's great, and hopefully the listeners do, and it's awesome. But 90% of life isn't that. 95% of life is work, showing up day to day, dealing with, I don't understand this language, I don't understand this culture, this thing is corrupt, I have no money. And that takes character, because it's easy to, not easy, but it's simpler to do one like spontaneous act of courage. Oh, I'm going to quit my job tomorrow. But you're going to wake up on Monday and not have a job and have no money. And the courageous thing is going to be day to day doing it, right? That's the real courage. And so I'd say tell people, know what you're getting into, have partners, because you can't do it by yourself. Those are some of the things that cross my mind, other than what like any one person's circumstances would be.
That's phenomenal advice.
Yeah.
For anybody, it's phenomenal advice.
I'm trying to take that advice for myself too. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you have no idea how often I say stuff to students or clients, and the entire time I'm thinking, take notes, take notes, take notes.
I should do that. That's a good idea.
I should take my own advice.
Yeah, I know the feeling well. Yeah, I guess that's part of wisdom, is learning to even learn those things.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I've really, 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 this has been such a treat for me to hear this.
Yeah. Anyone can email me. You want me to give my?
Yeah, go for it. What's your email?
Anyone out there can email me, tanderson@speakupforthepoor.org. Anyone can email me and check out our website. And I'd love to talk to people who want to, do courageous things. And I can't guarantee if 10,000 people email me that I'll be great with everyone, but I'll do my best to talk to anyone. And we'd love to have people join us as sponsors and check out our website. But personally, I'd love to talk to people who are on the edge of doing something cool, because I'll help push them.
Oh, yes. Oh, I would love that. I would love that. So you guys, this has been such an amazing treat. Thank you so much, Troy.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. And I hope your work blows up too and helps influence a lot of people for the better.
Today's takeaway episode is simply go find the work of Speak Up for the Poor. Specifically, go find them on Instagram, and you can scroll through portraits of the bravery they are empowering internationally through the girls that they work with. And if you're inspired to support them financially, I wholeheartedly encourage you to sponsor the education of a Speak Up girl. It only costs $30 a month, and it will literally give her the world. I've even dropped a link to their Facebook album of all the girls who are currently waiting for sponsors, so you can check that out in the show notes for this episode. Troy and I would love to hear all about your favorite parts of today's Barenaked Bravery that we discussed. You can find Speak Up and Troy and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all of that. Go ahead and tag us so that we can cheer you on and see what you're up to and see what you think of the show. That is our show for the week. I want to thank you again for listening. This is all stuff that is so, so, so important. So I really appreciate your open heart and open ears to listen to all of the wonderful things that are going on internationally in this realm. Well, again, we have put all the links in the show notes for today's episode, so be sure to visit us online for all of that. Go to barenakedbravery.com. You will find Troy or Speak Up. You can type that into the search box and this episode will pop right up. And if you enjoyed listening to the episode as much as we enjoyed making it for you, I encourage you to share this episode with a friend. It could be personal via text, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. Share it with somebody who you think would get a kick out of this episode too. That's how bravery is spread, and that's how we get braver people and a better world out there. So you are a part of that. If you are digging the music for today's episode, that is because it's brought to you by my friends at Music Box Licensing. They're so wonderful, a premier creative music agency dedicated to finding and crafting unique soundtracks. To find out more about all the artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, please visit barenakedbravery.com/sponsors. I'm super looking forward to being with you next week, and in our next episode later on in the week, we have some really great things in store for you. So until then, I have one message for you. It's this: Be yourself, be vulnerable, be imaginative, be improvisational, be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.